Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and your sommelier of science fiction and cinema, your archbishop of banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am, once again, robcasting at you. I don't even know why I point. Like, what's the point of that? It kind of looks dumb, doesn't it? You! Anyway, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. It is I, once again, with Robservations, episode number 613. The show about something. 613 shows. Wow! So, I just want to say 3 weeks ago, I tweeted something to the effect of, I said, you know what? For all of you people that aren't down with the slow burn of the first 2 episodes of WandaVision, I said, I will bet you that by the end of episode 5, you'll all be saying to yourselves, holy shit. Judging by social media, that's exactly what happened. Now, I'm not saying I'm the entertainment oracle of Delphi or at Delphi, but you all know that I kind of am. Most of the predictions I make on this show, I wonder what my percentage rate is. I don't know, because I speak extemporaneously, and who knows? I mean, I never go back and fact-check myself, although people have called in to fact-check me, and I'm very happy to admit when I'm wrong and to correct myself. I have no shame. When you're talking just off the cuff for hours on end, you're going to make mistakes. And as long as I don't offend anyone with those mistakes, I guess I'm doing okay. What do you think, Thanos? Well, he's ready. He's threatening to snap his fingers, as you can see. He's got the Infinity Gauntlet ready to snap. Maybe if I do something wrong, I'll just be gone, right? Mid-sentence. But anyway, so episode 5 of WandaVision dropped, which means we are now on the back end. 5 was our Rubicon. We've crossed it. Oh, boy. But you know what? It really got me thinking. Watching WandaVision got me thinking. And I don't know about all of you who are, I don't know if you're MCU fans or whatever, but I have found WandaVision so far to be enormously satisfying. And it really got me thinking about, well, why? Why is it satisfying? What is it about the MCU that I find enormously satisfying? Now, you know what? You could get into a philosophical debate about, a lot of people say that the MCU plays it safe. The MCU plays it, it's a little milquetoast, maybe a little too middle of the road for some people. I don't know what they're expecting because it is based on Marvel Comics. And as somebody who's been reading Marvel Comics my whole life, the beauty of seeing the realization of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as it has grown, 23 movies so far. It should have been 24, but we haven't seen Black Widow yet. But 23 movies and now 1 television show. We know that there's a film waiting in the wings with Black Widow and another one in Eternals. 2 films that are completed. We've got Shang-Chi following that up. And apparently Spider-Man 3 is coming. We don't know when necessarily. We also know that Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is coming. But anyway, you're going to be looking at 23, 24, 25, 26 films. Thor Love and Thunder is shooting. And we know that we're getting, after WandaVision, starting in March, we're getting The Falcon and Winter Soldier. Apparently there's even a Super Bowl spot you can watch for that. But I was thinking, you know, of all the franchises that have ever existed, entertainment franchises, take your pick. Doctor Who, Star Wars, James Bond, whatever. I think the most consistent, certainly with the best track record, has been the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Why is that? Why is Marvel, I mean, I would say the obvious one being that you have Kevin Feige at the helm, Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso. The people running the Marvel Cinematic Universe are the reason why it is doing so well. Now, I mentioned this on another podcast I was on yesterday. One of my favorite books I ever read about the entertainment industry was screenwriter William Goldman, screenwriter and novelist. William Goldman, of course, wrote the screenplays for things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He also wrote the book The Princess Bride and adapted the screenplay for Rob Reiner, adapted the book into a screenplay for Rob Reiner. And he famously said in his book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, which, like I said yesterday, the references might be a little old, so they're not rolling off your tongue when you read them. They were at the time when I read the book. I think I read the book in the 80s when it first came out. But the old adage that no one in Hollywood knows anything. And the thing about Hollywood is the reason no one knows anything, because if you know something and if you say, oh, yes, I know this, and you're wrong, you could lose your job. You could be drummed out of the industry because so much is at stake. But there is one person, and I will say, I used to call him the Lord and Savior, Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige, he knows. He knows. And how do I know this? I know this because the work speaks for itself. Like I'm always fond of saying, allow your work to be the locomotive on the train track of your life. You let the locomotive be your work, you're the caboose. And if the locomotive is strong and it's fired up and you got enough coal in the engine and there's maintenance that's been done, good work. The good work is the locomotive. That locomotive will take you down the tracks and you can get off wherever you want. You can have a whistle stop. You can talk to people. You can, metaphorically, do whatever you want. The stronger your locomotive is, the stronger the work that you've done is, the more places you'll go. Well, I would say that I've never seen a stronger franchise ever in entertainment history since I've been alive than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Collectively, 23 movies, if you average them out, made $1 billion. We've talked about this. How many times do I have to say this? Kevin Feige cut his teeth on 13 Marvel movies before he worked on Iron Man, before there was an MCU. And that's not to say they haven't been always entirely successful. People look at The Incredible Hulk, people look at Iron Man 2, people look at Thor: The Dark World. But even on a scale of 1 to 10, it's not like those were below 6. Even maybe the lowest point of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is what another franchise might consider their high point. And certainly, I was curious: is Marvel's first foray into television, is that going to be something? Is it going to work out for them? Is Wanda Maximoff going to be is she going to carry the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Is she going to be able to cast her spell over viewers the way I'm sure Kevin Feige would want her to? We didn't know. 5 episodes in, I'd say we do now. But why? What is it that makes a successful franchise? How is it that other franchises, which should be long-time franchises that have been around a lot longer than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, why aren't they as satisfying? Well, first and foremost is, I would say, leadership. As I said, the people at the top, starting with Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso, the three of them, I don't know what kind of... They're the Three Musketeers. I don't know if they have D'Artagnan, but they're the Three Musketeers. They know how to make shit happen. They wield their swords better than anybody. And it's because they know. Unlike what William Goldman might say, nobody knows anything. They know. As a matter of fact, I would dare say they're the only people that know. In all of Hollywood, they're the only people that know. Like if I had to place a bet, even if someone said, Rob, we have to fend off an alien invasion from some foreign extraterrestrial power, who would you pick on Earth to lead the fight against the extraterrestrials? I'd say I know. I would pick Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso. And people say, who are they? What about our great military leaders? I'm like, no, I don't trust them. I do trust the heads of Marvel as far as it goes. But so I was looking up. I was like, okay, is there somebody or someplace? Me. Look for articles. Look for things to talk about on the show. Is there an article? And lo and behold, I thought I'd find some Bob Iger piece of work, but this was on Invoke. It's a website. Invoke Big Qual Decisions. Building a billion-dollar entertainment franchise, or building billion-dollar entertainment franchises, a conversation with Roger Miller. Entertainment franchises are at the heart of leading industry brands. If successful, franchises guarantee long-term profitability and consumer success that extends beyond the big screen. And this was published by Julia Condon. It was last updated on December 8th, 2020. And I thought this was sort of interesting because this is more of a business look at franchises. So I thought I would share, because maybe you'll find this article as interesting as I found this article about franchises, looking at it from a business perspective. So why don't we take a gander at this article? We sat down virtually with entertainment industry franchise leader Roger Miller, entertainment consultant, former vice president of integrated planning and franchise management at where? The Walt Disney Studio, to unlock the secrets behind building and maintaining successful entertainment franchises. For nearly 2 decades, Roger worked with some of the most ubiquitous franchises in the business at Disney. From the studio's original star Mickey Mouse and the Disney Princesses Collective to the more recent favorites like Star Wars and Marvel, Disney boasts some of the most well-known franchises in entertainment. So, what does it take to create and maintain the world's leading media and entertainment franchises? Read on to see what we discovered from our discussion with Roger Miller. Planning for entertainment franchise success. You're probably wondering, is there a secret sauce, something that ensures a movie will become a franchise? According to this article, the answer is complex. When it comes to determining which movies will launch into successful entertainment franchises, there is one common theme. And I thought this nailed it, which is not rocket science here. The enthusiasm of the viewers. Like myself, the fact that I said weeks ago at the end of episode 5, by the way, I knew nothing about WandaVision. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing that was going to happen in the show before I watched it, knew nothing. And I said by the end of episode 5, we will all be going, holy shit, waiting with bated breath until the next episode. Well, last night I stayed up and watched episode 5, and at the end, even though I knew it was coming, I still, even after watching the episode, thought to myself, holy shit, because the whole episode surprised me, where's this going to go? Movie watchers tell you whether or not something is going to be a franchise, Miller says. You need all the parts. A universe that feels so full and quality storytelling. But you need the reaction from consumers. There are a lot of film franchises that people determined were going to be franchises before they ever came out that didn't necessarily have the audience respect after they released. That being said, Miller says you must expect success from the very beginning to establish franchise longevity if the story takes off with viewers. Expecting success means planning for opportunities to engage viewers and fans with the content outside of the initial launch. Miller explains, quote, having those conversations early, planning for it, and understanding who everyone's core consumer is and how they would want to activate against the core launch of the movie and how they see ongoing engagement or ongoing touch points helps companies maintain their business. Such corporate speak. Creating integrated plans for success. A key component of long-term franchise success is aligning creator and business stakeholders' ideas and goals for the property. It's important to align on goals and keep plans integrated across departments and functions while keeping fans top of mind. Miller breaks down this delicate balance. A lot of integrated plans are about conversations with filmmakers, conversations with marketing, conversations with business partners that are looking to commercialize that launch event without hurting your core fan base. Research plays a key role in keeping franchises alive and thriving too. In Miller's own words, in the media industry, people are consolidating their businesses and thinking more collectively. That will impact research because currently, prior to some of these things, there's television research, there's movie tracking and movie research, there's social listening, there's consumer product data from NPD data. They're looking at different segments and splits, so it's very challenging to aggregate it. The key to unlocking insights from research is to aggregate these various forms of data to see the bigger picture. Ultimately, viewers decide whether content succeeds. As Miller says, let the consumer decide. If you offer it and it doesn't work, then you don't do it again. Social media provides instant superfan feedback. Consumers not only sway a franchise's success by choosing to view it or not, they also influence the success of the brand by voicing their opinions online. With 3.81 billion people actively using social media in the world today, social listening has quickly become a tool for collecting consumer feedback. Miller says, through social platforms, we hear more instant feedback. We hear feedback early and often, whereas you waited for tracking or other kinds of data before. Social media helps studios to determine whether their content is creating any sort of buzz and what kind of buzz it's creating, outside of more traditional consumer research. Social media allows studios direct access to their top fans' perspectives. Miller elaborates, this gives you a pulse of your most engaged because they're the ones constantly commenting versus your more passive audience. Streaming's impact on brands. Besides social media, another internet-based phenomenon is changing the media landscape. The increasing shift from traditional broadcast television to streaming platforms changes the ways consumer regards brands, networks, and franchises. Miller notes, I think it'd be very fascinating to see how much people become loyal to streaming services and their brands, or if they remain loyal to the actual show. In the past, viewers were more aware of the network they were consuming content on. It was easier to tell if a TV show was from MTV or National Geographic, for example. Today, television shows and franchises themselves receive more brand recognition than the streaming platform they're hosted on. Depends what the show is, I think. Platforms like Netflix and Hulu attempt to bridge this gap by creating original content, but these platforms lack the focused brand positionings that networks have cultivated over the years. Miller adds, it will be interesting to see as people have a direct consumer relationship whether or not they will push their own brand to drive more value and connection to their own content versus continuing to play in those different sorts of lanes or just original or cool new content that you know for the name of the show, not the brand that brought it to you. Now, there is a longer interview with him, and I think that I'll put this in the live chat so you can check it out. But when I read this, what I thought was really interesting about this article is it says a lot of, here's the article, by the way, there's an interview with him too. But at the top of this article, it says, well, basically what he's saying is that engagement with your fans is crucial because the core of your brand, whatever your franchise is going to be, it's a franchise because it has fans. And your core fans, your uber fans, are the people that keep it going. Now, one of the things that I find interesting lately is there's been a lot of talk in our imagination circles about, do you prefer a binge model or a weekly model, rolling out shows over the course of a week? Or we've had lately hybrid models. Let's release 2 and 3 episodes of a series, you get people hooked, and then you wheel them in with a weekly. You reel them in, not wheel them in. You don't want to wheel your audience in, you want to reel them in. If you have to wheel them in, that means they probably have a broken leg or they're too infirm to even pay attention to your franchise, so you want to reel them in. So you do that by creating a buzz. And I have to say, again, Kevin Feige knows what's up. Do we release WandaVision as a binge model or do we release it weekly? Well, if they had released this as a binging model, you would not have the entire internet being burned up every time they release an episode, meaning the engagement and the fan investment in your product is amazing. Now, here's the thing. Part of the reason that WandaVision is so the story, I think, has been wonderful. It has far exceeded my expectations. But what's really interesting about WandaVision, if you think about it, it has roots. It is both sequel and prequel to various, well, basically all of the MCU. So in a way, you could find distant ties to even the furthest reaches of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So you've got 23 movies that it is a sequel to. And now one of the genius things that Kevin Feige has done, Kevin Feige and his crew, is, and you'd think that somehow this would be a no-brainer. But one of the things that they have done over at Marvel is shocking, is they go to their original inspiration, which were the Marvel comic books. The Marvel comic books themselves, such as the Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries from the mid-'80s. They look at something like that, and the one that came before this one. And Lovers and Zombies. I mean, look at this. 1 in a 12 issue miniseries, Lovers and Zombies, Vision and Scarlet Witch. Well, there you go. Tell me that isn't something they were inspired by when they made WandaVision. But that's one of the geniuses of the MCU. Kevin Feige knows, like, we already have our core brand. It's being published for decade after decade after decade. There's been some amazing storytellers that have told these wonderful stories. So we already have where we're going to look to. We don't have to copy them exactly, but let's go look there, and we'll find whatever we need. It's all there. And that's somebody who's smart. And they work within a paradigm, and it's amazing. And what I have been so amazed by as we've watched WandaVision unfold over 5 episodes now, and this was a longer episode, it was 41 minutes, the way it was integrated into the rest of the Marvel Universe, it was integrated into the rest of the Marvel Universe because it presupposes intelligence on the part of the viewer. They are not afraid. I even have people coming after me on Twitter going, well, the casual viewer who's watching the show is not going to know about the comic connections or the movie connections or these distant connections, and how is that going to appeal to the normal viewer? And I would say there are no casual viewers of the MCU. Not now. And everybody's invested. Even if you don't know anything, you go onto the internet the next day, you jump on, and you can see any number of spoiler discussions or explanations for what happened, deep Easter eggs in this episode or that episode. What the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done, what this interview had said to do, is create engagement with the viewer. And WandaVision, I think, more so than any other, the biggest engagement any viewers had as far as the MCU goes was, of course, the end of Infinity War. After the snapping, or the dusting, whatever you want to call it. After the snapping happened, everybody was invested. What's going to happen? Oh my God, I can't believe it. How are they going to get out of this one? So, brilliantly, there was a year's worth of speculation fueled by people's fervor, which brought our love of Marvel to a fever pitch. And whether you want to be cynical and say, there were things in Endgame that didn't make sense or whatever, that's fine. I don't begrudge you that. But in terms of a giant, massive fantasy epic, there have been few achievements grander than the 1-2 punch of Infinity War and Endgame. In terms of incorporating all the deliciousness you might possibly have wanted from a franchise. And why? Because it was all planned. Because the powers that be, Kevin Feige knows his core audience isn't stupid. And he also knows his core audience wants them to succeed. His core audience, and I consider myself, I'm at the forefront, I'm the apex of whatever that core audience is. That's me. That's me, middle-aged man with one foot in the grave. I still am waiting with bated breath. Now, do I sit there and think, the Marvel Cinematic Universe isn't as good as Lord of the Rings, and it's not as good as Star Wars or Doctor Who or James Bond? I mean, come on, Rob, you've liked James Bond for a lot long. Yes, it is true, but I've never had such a satisfying relationship with an entertainment franchise as I've had with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What about Star Trek? Now look, Star Trek is my jam. It's my favorite thing since I was a kid, but even Star Trek has not been as satisfying as being an MCU fan because there's been a lot of things that Star Trek, let's face it, has come up short with, like the last 12 years. But also before that, there was a lot of things. I mean, the Star Trek movies were hit and miss. Star Trek itself, even the original series, still served up swill like And the Children Shall Lead. I mean, Spock's brain, I learned to have kind of a retro laugh at it, and there are girls in go-go boots and miniskirts, the givers of pain and delight. So I can overlook that, but you still get episodes, I mean, Plato's Stepchildren's sort of interesting, but we're stepping into Eden, so it's not like Star Trek is beyond reproach. Of course, Star Wars let me down in 1983 with Return of the Jedi, especially coming on the heels of Empire. I've said that a million times, but whatever. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe, now, for what it is, I don't expect War and Peace. You know, I'm going to see the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is an adaptation of the Marvel superheroes that I've grown up loving. So I'm not expecting to come out of it, even with the same feel as Lord of the Rings. I'm expecting to get comic book action, adventure, and I want to see the realizations of the characters I've seen on the 4-color funny pages my whole life. And I got that. I got that because the people that are making the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they know what they're doing. If you ask them a question, they'll tell you an answer, and they would be right. And I think that's something that we have to remember going forward. The problem is, in order to have a successful franchise, you need to have people that are working on the franchise that love it too. And I think when franchises fall on their heads, it's because the people that are working on the franchises don't love it as much as their fans do. And I think the only reason you can develop the kind of fan base that all of these franchises want is when it's very apparent to the people at home watching that the people that are making the show love the source material and love the franchise as much as they want their audiences to love the franchise. And I think that's it. I think ultimately that is the secret. It's engaging fandom, meaning your audience, but really it ultimately comes down to you have to be making a product, meaning the franchise, that you as a creator believe in and love. And I mean love it for its own sake. Love it holistically. Don't love it because it's going to, bring you a good paycheck. I mean, you really need to love this franchise. And I don't think, there's been all this talk about how, like, working on Star Trek and Star Wars, they never wanted to have fans come on and work on Star Trek. Like, if you were a fan, you had to, downplay that because everyone's like, no, this isn't like our old Star Trek. I think that way lies death. I think ultimately you're either working on a franchise or you're not. You're either accepting everything about that franchise or you're not. And you love your fans. Your fans are not, they're the reason the franchises have endured for 50 plus years. You who are currently, look, this, as Renee Belloc said to Indiana Jones, we're just passing through history. But this, pointing at the Ark, this is history. Our franchises are history. And the creators and even the audiences are just passing through. But if you want to stop and garner an audience, you as a franchise creator, you need to love that franchise. It is very clear and very apparent, especially when you're watching WandaVision, that these people who are making this show, whether it's your writer, creator, whether it's the director who's been directing every episode, whether it's the actors, I mean, Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, how much fun are they having? They have to be loving what they're doing because it comes through in every episode. It oozes off the screen. The fun everyone is having, the care with which these episodes are, the design work. I mean, the integrated design throughout this entire show. One day when the show is all over, I'm sure we're going to get like the Art of WandaVision or something, and they'll take us through everything. Whether it's the period commercials, which, do they all represent Infinity Stones? Could be, I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me because that level of thinking and every commercial as it relates back to something from the previous movies that we can recognize, whether it's a person or a place, it's unbelievable. It's astonishing. And I just think to myself, my God, the people over at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what they're doing over there, they're mad geniuses because they care so much and love it so much and imbue their work with so much love and affection that it's, for me as somebody, I am getting exactly, it's funny to me, I'm getting exactly from the Marvel Universe, first what I expected, what I hoped it would be, and I'm surprised by it. Even when, again, it can sometimes be uneven, but ultimately I think things have great watchability and I love them, but because the people who are making these things know that the fans will appreciate what they're doing. They love the fans. They love their audience. And it shows through. And WandaVision, more than almost anything else they've ever made, shows an incredible respect for their audience, and judging by the online chatter and everybody delving into Marvel Comics history, they're not wrong. So I think there's an important lesson there for everybody who's going to create some kind of a new, whether Chloe Zhao, who just finished the Eternals and has Nomadland coming, now she's famously been announced to direct Dracula. I don't know if that's going to fit in. Are they going to try and make a shared universe of Universal monster movies with Invisible Man, now Dracula? I mean, an Old West cyberpunk space science fiction Dracula. I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm there for it. I don't know if it's part of a shared cinematic universe of Blumhouse is resurrecting the Alex Kurtzman destroyed dark universe that they wanted to make, but it's still pretty interesting, and why not get somebody who might win an Academy Award, the second female director to win a regular Academy Award for directing. She has the Eternals under her belt, and maybe now she's going to have a shared universe movie over at Universal. Craziness. But anyway, also very, very exciting. When I watch an episode of WandaVision, I know that I, as an audience member and as an Uber fan, I'm being treated right by the creators. And that is the best lesson, the best thing that you need to understand. As I'm getting thrown over and beaten to a pulp by Star Trek for their disrespect to me as an audience member, I feel I'm like leaving the shelter and I go over and watch a Marvel Cinematic Universe effort like, well, WandaVision, and they're making sure that they're like, Rob, can we get you anything? Would you like a mint julep? Can we give you a massage? And I feel, you know what I feel like WandaVision is? It's like going and getting the best massage you've ever had, and the happy ending is how great the story is that they're telling me. The happy ending comes with the big grin on my face when I come to the end of one of those episodes and realize they really care about me as an audience member because they're assuming I am very, very smart and that I will buy into this, and they're even ahead of me. That, to me, is how to make a great franchise, and that is why WandaVision, like the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, works. Because they know their audience, they love their audience, and they will never talk down to their audience. And that's the secret of a great franchise. And its longevity. Speaking of franchises, Mike F. writes in and says, hello again, Rob, and to the Post-Geek Singularity. It's been a while since I last wrote a letter, since I was busy managing my blog and producing videos for my YouTube channel. Anyways, in this letter, I want to talk about the upcoming series Clarice, especially now that the reviews are out. When they announced that CBS will do a Clarice TV series with Alex Kurtzman involved and not whatsoever related to Brian Fuller's wonderful Hannibal series, I was already out. Not just because of Kurtzman, but I know that they'll just turn it into a typical CBS procedural show. The reviews pretty much indicated that the series will really go in that way moving forward. Then they said due to legal reasons, Hannibal Lecter cannot be showed or even mentioned by name. That alone made me say that the series is screwed. You can't do a Clarice Starling-focused show after the events of Silence of the Lambs that doesn't mention Hannibal Lecter at all. He was integral to her. I have a feeling that the show, second season, if they get renewed onwards, will just become a typical procedural show. All these silence references with Buffalo Bill might just happen in the first season. Then once they shift it to a second season, it'll become its own and become a CBS procedural with the name Clarice Starling stamped on the main character. I obviously have not seen the show, and I shouldn't react based on the reviews alone, but I have no plans to see the show anyway, because I can already feel what it will turn out to be, and I know that they will just bastardize the legacy of Silence or Thomas Harris's Lecter mythos in general. In the show's TCA panel, Alex Kurtzman said, the tagline for the show, which kept pushing itself into the foreground, is, "The silence is over." And I think that meant she had not spoken in 30 years, and it's our time to speak now. That was our compass. That's what led us. That's what we wanted to do, and we didn't want to tread territory that has been done so well by so many others. I would say no. They did it only because of money. And for me, they're not the right people to speak for Clarice Starling. It's just some BS to make themselves look like they're honoring Silence and they're passionate for the project. In reality, it's just a franchise opportunity for them. I want to hug Brian Fuller because he deserves so much better. I will say it again, but I can't believe that Kurtzman is involved with this. Not just because of his bad modern Star Trek shows, but for me, he directed one of the worst films I've ever seen, The Mummy. Pardon my French, but that movie was garbage. I hated it. That's a bastardization of the Universal monsters. I remembered when my friend walked out of the theater and we watched it with his father, and he sent me a text and said, I just watched The Mummy. I remembered when my friend walked out of the theater when he watched it with his father, and he sent me a text message and said, I just watched The Mummy. It was horrible. What a waste of time. I agree. It really was horrible and a waste of time. Kurtzman shouldn't handle any franchises, but here we are. Anyway, thank you for reading this letter, which ended up as a rant. Oh, I'm here for your rant. I'm just baffled that Kurtzman's Clarice series is really happening. He doesn't even understand the concept of villains in Star Trek. How come they're letting him do these things? My God. Stay safe and live long and prosper. Well, as was announced today, Chiwetel Ejiofor is going to be starring in The Man Who Fell to Earth for CBS, an adaptation of Walter Tevis, who, yes, wrote The Queen's Gambit, that we've all loved this year, or last year. Walter Tevis also wrote The Hustler and The Color of Money, and a great science fiction novel that should one day, now because of the success of The Queen's Gambit, get made, Mockingbird. Well, that's right. Walter Tevis also wrote The Man Who Fell to Earth, that was first adapted by Nicholas Roeg and famously starred David Bowie. By the way, I heard from a rather trusted source that they're somehow going to incorporate David Bowie into the series, because why? Of course they are. Although I will say this, Chiwetel Ejiofor is inspired casting for the new Man Who Fell to Earth. I have no problem with that. I love Chiwetel Ejiofor. I think the man can do no wrong. And he was in Love Actually, which makes him even cooler. So anyway, I agree. I don't know how he gets to do all of these things. I really don't. But I don't feel that I'm getting any intellectual bang from anything he's involved with. And by the way, if you have never seen Nicholas Roeg's Man Who Fell to Earth, it's one of my favorite science fiction movies. It's very challenging. It's long, but I think it's very, very worth your time. And of course, David Bowie stars as the titular Man Who Fell to Earth. Buck Henry is in it. Candy Clark is in it. It's a wonderful movie. I love it. I'm a huge Nicholas Roeg fan, especially that era of Nicholas Roeg, whether it's Don't Look Now, whether it's Man Who Fell to Earth, whether it's even things like Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession. I love that. I really appreciate what he did with Time. His movie Insignificance I really liked. Anyway, check it out. This next one comes from Jason Webster. Jason Webster says, Hi, Robert. I hope yourself and the fabulous members of the Post-Geek Singularity have experienced a terrific day or night, depending on which part of the world one may be inside of. Akira Kurosawa is quite simply one of the greatest directors of all time. Yes, he is. A legend whose magnificent career spanned decades, over which he directed 31 feature films and served as a producer on 14 films and a screenwriter on 29 films. Many named classics, and a few such as Rashomon, Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, and Ron, have been rightly classified as masterpieces. Kurosawa won both the Golden Lion and the Silver Lion Awards at the Venice Film Festival, the Palme d'Or for his direction of Kagemusha in 1980, and BAFTA Awards for Kagemusha and Ron. In 1990, he received an honorary Academy Award for Special Lifetime Achievement. Overall, Kurosawa received 64 awards over the course of his distinguished career. Rashomon, from 1950, is considered one of the greatest Chambira Jidaigeki films ever made. The film is somewhat of a psychological mystery thriller. Based upon the short story In a Grove, written by Takashi Shimura, Rashomon is the story of three slightly varied accounts of the murder of a samurai by a bandit played by Toshiro Mifune. The samurai's wife, Machiko Kyo, a Shinto medium, Noriko Honma, speaking on behalf of the dead samurai, and a woodcutter named Kokori, Takashi Shimura, at a trial. The woodcutter also disclosed his knowledge of the murder at Rashomon Gate to a priest and a commoner. The main theme of the film is the subjectivity of truth. The fact witnesses to the event give varied accounts of the murder of the samurai due to their own motivations or simply cannot accurately recall the events. So what is the truth and what is fabrication? Who is telling the truth? Kurosawa was a masterful director, and his effective use of composition achieved through cinematography with contrasting shots, lighting, and editing that emphasizes the variance of the accounts and further dramatizing action between the characters. Distributed by Daiei Films, Rashomon made its theatrical debut on Japan on the 25th of August, 1951. Ironically, while the film was a commercial success and won domestic industry awards, it was not loved by critics within Japan. This is because it baffled most critics, and they believe the reason for the film's success was because they felt Rashomon was more Western than other Japanese films released at the time. The film received its American theatrical release on the 26th of December 1951 through distributor RKO Pictures. It was a commercial and critical success, which resulted in the film receiving the award for Most Outstanding Foreign Language Film at the 24th Academy Awards. The film also won 2 honors at the National Board of Review Awards. It scored another top honor when it won the Golden Lion at Italy's most prestigious industry gala, the Venice Film Festival. Contemporary criticisms of Rashomon is overwhelmingly positive. The film holds a critic's score on Rotten Tomatoes of 98% and an audience score of 93%. The critical consensus is that Rashomon is one of legendary director Akira Kurosawa's most acclaimed films. Rashomon features an innovative narrative structure, brilliant acting, and a thoughtful exploration of reality versus perception. On IMDb, it holds a ranking of 8.2. In 2002, Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said of the film, "The wonder of Rashomon is that while the shadow play of truth and memory is going on, we are absorbed by what we trust is an unfolding story." In 2012, Slant Magazine's Chuck Bowen said, "Rashomon is often overpowering in its emotional intensity. Every image counts," commenting on the characters' evolving relationships, most obviously exemplified in the repeating use of triangular shapes, and the actors give performances of exacting subtlety that quietly shift to fit the specific storyteller's contortions of the events. In 2002, Rashomon ranked 9th in Sight and Sound's Director's Top 10 poll. In 2010, Empire Magazine ranked the film 22nd in a list of the 100 best films of world cinema. In 2018, Rashomon ranked number 4 on the BBC's list of the 100 greatest foreign language films. Rashomon inspired the 1964 Western remake entitled The Outrage, which was directed by Martin Ritt and starred Paul Newman. Other films inspired by Rashomon include Vantage Point from 2008, Police Story in 2013, Uladavru Kendafi in 2014, and Tombstone Rashomon in 2017. Rashomon clearly is one of the greatest films ever made, and it is compulsory viewing for film enthusiasts and film students, as well as fans of Asian cinema, alongside Kurosawa's other masterpieces, Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, and Ron. I hope yourself and members of the PGS have a tremendous end to the week and have a wonderful weekend. Sincerely, Jason Webster. Well, Jason, I agree with you 100% on this. If you have never seen Rashomon, it is one of the great films ever made. It's certainly one of my favorite films. I love Rashomon, and the lesson it has to teach us, to impart to all of us, I think is very important. Let's see. This one, where are we? Robservations from Calvin Bowes. Dear Rob, I was thinking about modern Star Trek, especially Lower Decks, and how they made a joke of it being the worst ship in Starfleet. This is the worst approach to doing Star Trek as a comedy. I think instead of making a show like The Simpsons or Rick and Morty, maybe a Star Trek comedy should take its lead from the Dick Van Dyke Show. I know you're thinking, how can what is done on that show be done on Star Trek? Well, let's start with the premise of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Rob Petrie is the head writer on the Alan Brady Show, the top-rated variety show in the country. Notice they acknowledge that they're the best in show business. Rob is a family man who supports his wife and son, and the comedy comes out of their everyday lives. Also working with Rob are Buddy and Sally. They're presented as the best writers on TV because if they weren't, they wouldn't be there. They're the unsung heroes. They don't get the applause, but they know without them there would be no Alan Brady Show. Now, this could be used in Star Trek. On the Enterprise, there are over 1,000 members of the crew, and some will never go on away missions, but everyone on that ship is the best in their field, even if you're just a janitor. Now let's put the Dick Van Dyke Show in Star Trek. We have Rob and Sally and Buddy working on the Enterprise, providing entertainment for the crew, say coming up with holodeck programs. The comedy comes out of their relationships at work and at home and in their quarters. Star Trek always took comedy from relationships and situations. I think this would have been a better approach to doing a Star Trek comedy. Tell me what you think. Well, Calvin, I think that's a very astute observation. I've always believed the original series basically has 2, if you want to count Shore Leave, 3 overt comedic episodes. Obviously, the first is The Trouble with Tribbles that everybody remembers. The second is a piece of the action, the episode where they find a planet patterned after Chicago mobs of the 1920s. Now, both of these episodes have very absurd situations. The Enterprise rolling up to a planet of gangsters in the 1920s is a little silly. However, because Star Trek is great, the idea of where it came from, that the inhabitants of the planet Sigma Iosha are very imitative people. So when the Horizon, before the Prime Directive was in place, the Horizon, which was an Earth ship, an expedition that made it to Sigma Iosha first, they left behind a book called Chicago Mobs of the 20s. Well, this very imitative, very clever and creative people, the Sigma Ioshans, the humanoids that live on Sigma Iosha, they decided this book must be very important. They didn't understand the nuance. They didn't understand about history or anything like that, but they took this book at face value. Somehow they were able to read the language. Maybe it was a translated book given as a gift to somebody, that you figure out how the language works, and then you can plug it into the computer, and they'll just spit out you just beam a book into existence, and you gave it to the Sigma Iosans. Well, they copied the book because they thought of it not as a historical record, but as something to emulate, something to actually do, which that in itself is a pretty interesting science fiction premise, and I love that. But more importantly, it was the situation they found themselves in, which was patently absurd. But once, like I've always said, you get a big ask. Once you've set the situation up and people believe in it, then our characters dropped into that situation and trying to navigate those waters, those fish out of waters, that's where the humor comes in. And one of the things that I think you do best, the best kind of humor, especially in franchise properties, is when you're telling a humorous story, you do not do it at the expense of the characters. You don't make our characters look stupid, or you don't put the main characters up for ridicule. That's the wrong way to do comedy. And I think that Star Trek Lower Decks was basically a modern comedy transposed into the Star Trek world, as opposed to being a great comedy set in the Star Trek universe. I think that's the difference. So I agree with you, Calvin. I think that they could have done a better job. Now, speaking of franchises, this letter comes from Rogue Thinker. Hello, Rogue Thinker. Rogue Thinker says, "Greetings to you, Rob, and to all the entities who share the Post-Geek singularity. I would like to type about a topic related to canon and established intellectual property. How is it that Hollywood seems to miss the fact that established IPs are as popular as they are because they are what they are? Let's take Spider-Man, for example. There have been thousands of superhero comic books. Many artists and writers have made many variations. But Spider-Man was successful and popular because of how he's been presented in the comics over decades. When this depiction is changed, fans often find it becomes less enjoyable and sales go down. So why does a director say, I need to change things to show my vision of Spider-Man? They want to make the movie because Spider-Man is popular, and that will translate into money. So why change it? Obviously, it needs some changes to move it to a different media, but the best Spider-Man movie was the one that adapted the source material and made the fewest changes. Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. That is only one example. Why is it when they develop a successful property, they feel a need to change it? Has that ever been beneficial? Lord of the Rings did it great, and Peter Jackson is known for how well he brought that story to the screen. Game of Thrones, the more they deviated from the books, the worse it got. Star Trek, when they abandoned canon in order to make it a platform for activism, does that help the show, the storytelling, or even the ratings? Anyhow, I could rant on this subject for hours, but I would rather hear your thoughts, if you feel like sharing them, and those of everyone in the chat. Thanks again, and all the best to you, the ace, and all of the Post-Geek singularity." Rogue Thinker, a short letter, but definitely sweet and to the point. Look, I agree with you. I think that, look, even though my opinion on this has changed a little bit since the Critical Drinker and I talked about this, like I've always been calling, I said what Ryan Coogler did with Creed was very respectful of the Rocky mythos. Now, after talking to the Drinker, who I consider to be, if you guys don't watch the Critical Drinker, I make it a point, I do not like to talk ill of fellow YouTubers. I think people who do talk ill of fellow YouTubers, it's gauche. But I do like to sing the praises of my fellow YouTubers, on the other hand. And the Critical Drinker, you might not always agree with him politically, but he is a very astute analyzer of storytelling. And I think any of the Critical Drinkers deep dives into whatever, it's probably a good bet that the Critical Drinker, and he's just a YouTuber, but he spends a lot of time on his videos. I did stream with him for the occasion of the 41st anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I quite enjoyed it. I've enjoyed his videos, but he writes scripts for his videos in advance. He spends a lot of time analyzing the things that he analyzes. And I think that one of the points that you're making, Rogue Thinker, is, and just like what the Critical Drinker will say, is you need to understand the story you're telling. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time, like you said, when you're making a Spider-Man story, you're making a Spider-Man story. Your audience, as we knew from earlier in this episode, your audience who you're making the film for is, now they want to see a Spider-Man story. That's why you look at Spider-Man, like Thinker pointed out, Spider-Man 2, very, very great spider stories. Great Spider-Man story. Very fulfilling. Fulfilling as a movie, fulfilling as a story, fulfilling as a Spider-Man story. They really nailed it with that film. And it's still beloved. How many years later? And 17 years later now, I think? And that's what people want. And what I find really interesting is this idea that, and we see it all the time, we're going to change this thing that people have loved. Like I don't know if there are two characters now that there are two characters lately, very similar characters. There's been both talk of Star-Lord, that's right, Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, and Captain Kirk being reframed as bisexual characters. I'm not kidding. They're talking about making Star-Lord bisexual in the comics and Captain Kirk bisexual in some way, shape, or form. Now, I'll freely admit it. I like human sexuality in all of its myriad forms. I'll even occasionally watch a bisexual porn and enjoy it and be unapologetic. I might even watch it twice. However, that said, I don't think that you serve anybody by then deciding, well, both Kirk and Star-Lord have been around for the better part of 50 years. Kirk since 1966, Star-Lord since the early 70s. When you tell people that you're going to change first of all, sexuality has never really been at the forefront of a comic book character or Kirk, believe it or not. Sure, that was a trait, but if you really look at, Kirk is not like lasciviously boning down with beautiful women all the time. Sure, he's a ladies' man, and in an episode like Bread and Circuses, the proconsul might give him one of his slaves, and Kirk will then say the next day to Spock, "What happened to you?" "Oh, they threw me a few curves." Sure, I admit that, but Kirk's sexuality and sexuality in general is not at the forefront of Star Trek because it's a science fiction action adventure show that's also allegorical. Star-Lord might make a few jokes and talk about how if you had an ultraviolet light, what the inside of the Milano would look like. I get it. That's great. He's a virile man. But when new creators want to come along and that's what they're going to do, this is the problem that I have with, and I think it's a problem that a lot of people have with these characters. Suddenly, you're going to take a long-standing character and change that character because it's fashionable now, because, oh, it's a way that we can shoehorn in some representation into something. I think what you do when you do that is and now look at that across the board. Don't just fundamentally change the characters, but let's change the premise. Let's change the name of Vulcan to Navarre, which, by the way, whenever you hear the word Navarre, if you're a Discovery fan, tell me you don't think of Rutger Hauer in Ladyhawke. Navarre? Because that's what I do. They don't even have an original name. Don't rename Vulcan Navarre, because basically what you've done is you've renamed Vulcan after Rutger Hauer's character in Ladyhawke. Am I wrong? But the thing is, when you do these kinds of things, it turns people off. It turns, and not because people, look, it's not about the sexuality of the character. I don't care what the character's sexuality is. But when you're going in and changing these long-standing characters to be fashionable for today, what you are doing is you're fundamentally changing first of all, you're putting a trait at the forefront of these characters. Now, forever, people are going to be like, oh, we can't wait to see that action happen. You know, are Spock and Kirk finally going to hook up? We're going to see some real slash action like we've always wanted to. I mean, to be honest, I've had slash fiction since I was like 10, and I always thought it was, well, beautifully illustrated, but really kind of out of character. And so I don't think that this is the way to go about things. What you got to do is what people want to see. If you're making a Spider-Man story, then tell me a great Spider-Man story. And you can tell Spider-Man 2, there, point to that. There's a great Spider-Man story. Audiences want to see that. You've got to give your audience credit first and foremost. So, yeah, it's a wacky time we live in, and it's strange. Sometimes you probably find more out about me on these shows than you want, but there you go. This next one comes from Ken. Ken says, Rob, I got to say it, The Little Things was great. Acting, noir storytelling, mystery, tension, and a unique look at detective lives with trauma. Your thoughts on this film? Ken, I have to say, I thought The Little Things was a tremendous disappointment. I was really disappointed, by the way, in The Little Things. I thought that, look, obviously the performances are great. I thought Denzel Washington was great, but there was nothing in that movie that I had not seen done and done better in other places. Now, I have to say, to be fair, one of the things I do love about The Little Things, and I will always say I love this about The Little Things, is that John Lee Hancock, the writer-director of The Little Things, he wrote this script like 30 years ago, and it didn't get made. And the fact that he was able, after so long, to get the script made and to have those people star in it is a good thing. I'll accept that as a win for him. But on the other hand, the question is, just because they could have done it, should they do it? Is the studio going to see some kind of an investment returned to them? Because it was not cheap to make, even though it could have been. And I just think that, you know, sometimes stories, depending on how they're told, unless they're told in a unique or innovative way, while, sure, it was definitely highbrow, I just felt that there was nothing in it we hadn't seen before in other places, especially over the last 30 years. If you're going to make a serial killer now, a serial killer movie now, you need to take into consideration, well, what other kinds of movies have there been in that same milieu? And you're not just competing with the movie that you're making or the ideas that you have, but you're competing with everything else in that genre. And the serial killer genre over the last 30 years is pretty rich with great stuff. Whether you want to point to Silence of the Lambs, I said Kiss the Girls, and Along Came a Spider, or, of course, the granddaddy of all modern serial killer movies, Seven, directed by the great David Fincher and written by Andy Kevin Walker. You know, when you've got that, and then you're watching The Little Things, it's a little hard to pull somebody in. But I did think it was handsomely made. The important thing is, Ken, is that you liked The Little Things. I love serial killer movies. It's a favorite genre of mine. And I found I liked The Little Things when I was watching it, but it left me really disappointed because it just didn't cover any real innovative new ground, and that bummed me out. But I do love the fact that you liked it because, listen, you know what? You might not have consumed nearly, I can't tell you how many books I've read about serial killers, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, how many movies I have watched about serial killers. And so I might have just delved into that genre more deeply than you have. So you weren't as disappointed as me because you hadn't been so steeped in it. So never feel bad, and I don't want to make you feel bad. I'm glad you liked it, and there's certainly a lot to like in that movie. And you know what? I would actually recommend it. I would definitely recommend that film. Jared Snyder is here. Jared Snyder says, Dear Rob and my fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity, some thoughts on canon. Storytelling is a human characteristic. The poet Robert Bringhurst suggests that a culture with a highly developed visual arts must be assumed to have equally complex narrative arts. Ooh, I like that. With the discovery of lifelike cave paintings in Borneo, we should start thinking that human beings have participated in sophisticated storytelling for at least 45,000 years. Then how come we're not getting better Star Trek, damn it? Through the process of natural selection, we literally feel good storytelling in our bones. When anthropologists began collecting from traditional storytellers, they often use words like fragmentary or incomplete to describe their results. With small research budgets, they were on tight schedules, heard only some stories, and rarely heard stories more than once. Their transcriptions weren't incomplete. The collectors simply had no time to learn canon. Canon greases the wheels of imagination, and canon is only obtained through experiencing multiple stories over time. Canon gives storytellers a shorthand so they can focus on the story, and good storytelling promises important facets will be revealed if the listener makes the commitment to listening. Each mention of a phaser grows our canon. A weapon, a pistol, standard issue, beam, adjustable, stun setting, recharge, overload, explode, makes hard surfaces molten, etc. The storyteller can evoke all of this meaning with just the mention of one word, and with each new reference, the listener's mind returns to scenes with a phaser, and the meaning of the prior stories becomes richer. Bro, Jared, let me just tell you, that simple description of what you just said is one of the very cornerstones of all imagination connoisseur literature. Science fiction, fantasy, horror. What you just said, let me read that again. Now, instead of the word phaser, pick your favorite thing, wand or a computer or whatever device is your favorite thing. I'm going to read this one more time. Each mention of a phaser, or fill in the blank, your favorite item that a character uses in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Each mention of a phaser grows our canon. A weapon, meaning when you think of phaser, it's a weapon. It's a pistol. It's a standard issue piece of equipment. It fires a beam. It's an adjustable beam. It has a stun setting. You can recharge a phaser, which means it can run out of a charge. It can overload and explode. It can turn rocks into molten surfaces to keep you warm in, say, bad weather. The storyteller can evoke all of this meaning with just the mention of one word, and with each new reference, the listener's mind returns to scenes with a phaser, and the meaning of the prior stories becomes richer. That is the best example I've ever read about what canon and why canon is important to franchise properties like Star Trek, like Star Wars. So when you see, for instance, a turbo lift, we've been seeing how a turbo lift works within a starship since 1966. It works like an elevator, but instead of just going up and down, it can go up and down and right and left, and it can move in the shafts because it probably uses some kind of anti-gravity or whatever. But we know that it goes brrrr, and it can go brrrr, and it changes because we see the lights going in the car, and it moves if it's going up and down or this way, or we know. And that was just a little added detail. We know from episodes like Disaster what it looks like when someone gets stuck in a turbo shaft or a turbo elevator. When Discovery comes along and makes it look like there's a roller coaster inside a starship, that a turbo elevator, turbo shaft, or well, there's no shaft, then canon goes out the window, and suddenly the meaning that you take, and now watch a show where all of that is true, where Discovery throws canon out the window. But that's why canon is important, because it allows you to understand on multiple levels. It allows you to understand the entire universe, not just a phaser, a communicator, a tricorder, all of these things. The entire universe is explained just like you did. That was I love that. Post-2009 Star Trek only promises that there is no canon, that stories are intended to be incomplete and fragmentary. Nothing will ever fall into place, and the canon we acquired prior to 2009 has no standing. More than science fiction, I love great storytelling, and what Star Trek always promised was an opportunity to enjoy a story well told and to value our investment in participating. Learning its canon has been a rewarding experience. Our visceral reaction to the current Drek is about 45,000 years of ancestors whispering to us that that's not how it works, over and over. Live long and prosper, Jared M. Snyder, project manager by day, music historian by night. My man. Here's me looking at you, Jared. That is what I'm talking about. Such a simple thing, too. And when it comes to science fiction, fantasy, horror, genre entertainment, whether you're writing video games, comic books, TV or movies, those lessons right there is a very, very, very important lesson to learn. And as we learned from the article about franchises, you need to presuppose that your audience already knows the canon. And you need to give the audience what they need. Presuppose your audience is smart, and they're there. So why you got to diss them? Why you got to play them like that? This one comes from David Kukol. Hello, Rob. I hope you are well. Your show on the impact of nostalgia on our lives was fascinating. I do not view nostalgia itself as either a positive or negative thing. Like many aspects of life, the good or the bad lies in how it's used and the impact it has on our existence. The criticism of people who devote their time to old entertainment properties or even get too involved in modern ones is simplistic and far too broad. There are casualties, for lack of a better word, who retreat from reality to damaging degrees, but let's look at the positives. You are a fine example of someone who has turned his fanish interests into a professional career and other activities such as the shows in your YouTube network, your film festival and short story competition, which I'm entering. The fact that you directed a feature film, produce other films and documentary material is something to be admired. You are articulate, and your articulate and witty Robservations bring joy to your audience and give us plenty of food for thought, too. Even when I disagree with you, which isn't often, I come away with a different perspective on which to reflect. As for myself, I've not reached your career heights, but I've had many drawings in local art galleries, small press publications, and pre-COVID art festivals. These pursuits were fueled and nurtured by the fact that I grew up on a steady diet of science fiction, spy, and detective stories. I discovered Star Trek as a kid and made a crude drawing of the Enterprise, which was the first step on a long journey where I learned and refined my skills to the point where I am today. Okay, I'll never be in the Louvre, but that's okay. I'm doing something constructive that grew out of my love for nostalgic properties, which still have meaning for me today. The nostalgic love for imaginative fiction has inspired collectors, writers, artists, cosplayers, YouTube hosts, directors, designers. The list is endless. Yes, there's a dark side, but isn't that true of any human endeavor? A person can eat or drink themselves to death, but food and water are essential to life. I say that nostalgia is essential too, as long as it's put to proper use. Keep up the great work. Regards, David. What a great letter, David. I loved hearing that from you. And I think you're right. I mean, I think more so than nostalgia, it's inspiration. You know, like our own moderator, Greg Smith. I don't know if Greg Smith is here today. I don't see him. But Greg Smith is a guy, like, I went to school with Greg Smith, and if you watch the first Robservations, you can see, in terms of nostalgia, you can see an example of when he made basically a paper and cardboard Boba Fett costume, and then decades later, how he made a Boba Fett costume that was accurate enough to be approved by the 501st Legion, Vader's fist. You know, he was able to do that, and he also, in addition, was a great artist growing up, but now he built his own house. So I think all of these, I think to be a fan of these things, it isn't just, if you're a fan of something, it's not just being steeped in nostalgia. It is, in fact, you're being inspired. And I've often talked about on the show that I think people should turn around and use that love. I mean, I don't know if you guys know Jason Inman and Ashley V. Robinson, but if you don't, really good people. One of my favorite couples in all the world. They are, Jason Inman was in the military, and they've now, both of them have been making comics like Jupiter Jet, and I think Jason's new comic that he got crowdfunded is My Best Super Friend. My Best Super Friend is the name of his comic, I think. But what's really interesting is also Jason used his love of comic books and started every year was collecting comic books from people and sending them to our men and women serving overseas in the military, and now he's making his own comics. And that came right out of his love of comics growing up. And I think that one of the things that isn't talked about is we as fans, or talked about enough, is that we as fans and imagination connoisseurs, a lot of these things that people might call nostalgia are the things that, in fact, like you just pointed out, fueled you to become an artist. And you are showing your work, and you are turning around and using that as inspiration and making your own stuff. And I think a lot of us, that's indeed what it does. I mean, certainly all this stuff is born out of my love of things, but it's all fueled. It's all grist for the mill. This is all the stuff that's left here. This is like the radiation that all this stuff went through the engine of my mind, and now it's radioactive waste that is here, and it's half-life. I don't know how long its half-life is, but hopefully it's a long time. Let's see. I think I'll. You know what? No, let me jump in and see what you guys are saying. What are you saying now? I don't know. But there's been a lot of people here in the chat, and let's jump in and see what, in fact, you are saying. Let's go over there and see. We'll start with Jashan Cater. That's a cool name. Jashan Cater says, "Hello, Rob. I apologize for not having seen Star Trek yet." You don't have to apologize for not seeing Star Trek yet. "I will get to it because I know it's one of your favorite shows, minus the new one. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on Season 5 of The Expanse? I would love to hear your opinion. Thank you, and live long, and what is it? Thank you, and I don't know. I'm missing that acronym. I got to figure that out. Well, first of all, Jashan, I would say, when it comes to The Expanse, I'm a huge fan of The Expanse. I felt Season 5 was unbalanced. I really, really liked the first 4 episodes, and as I've said before, I thought the 3 episodes they spent with Marco Inaros and Naomi was way too drawn out. It could have been done so much quicker, and I think it would have had more impact if they had spent more time, or if they'd wrapped it up sooner. And I also think they needed, they spent last season, Bobby was on the case of this Martian conspiracy, and then at the beginning of this season, there was more of that Martian conspiracy. Well, that Martian conspiracy becomes a huge thing in the next year. And what was going on should have been as much a part of the season, and that mystery should have been as much a part of the season as this stuff with Naomi and Inaros, Marco Inaros and her son Philip. I mean, it killed it all. And by the time you get to the end, I thought the 10th episode I really enjoyed. I mean, it had to wrap up things very quickly, but I really enjoyed it. But I would say that episodes 7, 8, 9 should have had a lot more to them. It seemed like there was a lot going on in the galaxy that we just didn't ever see. But for the most part, I still enjoy The Expanse. I enjoy the characters, and I had a good time doing it. Jashan comes back and says, "Oh, by the way, I just finished school. I was wondering, would you recommend watching the original Star Trek films or watching the shows from the beginning? I have time now, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this." Watching the original Star Trek films or watching the shows from the beginning. Look, the Star Trek movies, especially the classic movies, will not mean anything, or not nearly as much, if you haven't seen the show first. And I would suggest going back, and here's the beginning of Star Trek. The way they have it ordered because of broadcast was very strange. So famously, there were 2 Star Trek pilots. One was called The Cage, and Jeffrey Hunter played Captain Pike. And there was a female number 1, played by Majel Barrett, and Mr. Spock was a science officer. That pilot was rejected. So don't watch The Cage on its own because it was rejected. However, brilliantly, The Cage was repurposed into a 2-part Star Trek episode in the first season, in the 66-67 season, called The Menagerie, Parts 1 and 2. And they used that unused pilot, the unsold pilot, they incorporated it into that episode, which created a Star Trek canon and a history brilliantly. It went back over a decade and gave us history of the Enterprise. It was fascinating. But I always recommend watching that episode Only watch the Menagerie Parts 1 and 2. Don't watch The Cage on its own, because it's not really the first episode of Star Trek. It was a rejected pilot, and it is only official the way they wanted it. It's only official watching it in the Menagerie. I mean, in terms of if you're gonna be a strict canonista, as I am, here's what you should do. I know when you look on Netflix or CBS All Access or whatever, the first episode of Star Trek from the original season, the original series, the first season, they're going to tell you to watch The Man Trap. Do not do that. What you have to watch is Where No Man Has Gone Before. That is the actual pilot episode of Star Trek as we know it. It was a retooled pilot after The Cage failed, but you have to watch Where No Man Has Gone Before, which was actually the third episode of Star Trek aired. Just take that third episode, move it to the front, then watch The Man Trap, and then watch Charlie X. You're all good, and go from there. And report back. Tell me what you think. Willow says, I don't know if we're allowed to talk spoilers for the latest WandaVision episode yet, but do you think that this is the Luke Skywalker level cameo that Elizabeth Olsen teased? I was really hoping for Magneto. Willow, let me tell you, I do not think that this was that cameo. And like I said on the John Campea show, I too would say it's probably more so than ever. I think either Michael Fassbender or Ian McKellen is going to show up as Magneto. I don't know. I have no knowledge. I have not read anything about this. I have no clue. But I would assume, or maybe someone else. Maybe someone else shows up. Maybe it's our first introduction to Reed Richards in the MCU. I don't know. But I do think it's going to be pretty epic, and it's not what we saw last night. Not at all. Although what we saw last night was dope. And really, if you think about what we saw last night, pretty much unprecedented in motion picture history, certainly franchise history. So, check it out. Rob, have you ever watched the 1993 movie Barbarians at the Gate with James Gardner? It's an older film, but I found it very interesting. The movie about the business. I did. I don't remember it at all. I saw it when it was first on. It was a big deal when it was first on, but I don't remember it. I have to go back and watch it. It's not about barbarians. It's about business, if I remember correctly. Eric Gant is here. Hello, Eric. An observation for Robservations. With WandaVision, Marvel Studios is creating a Dark Phoenix story more gripping, authentic, terrifying, and satisfying than Fox managed to do in 2 attempts. And they're doing it all without Dark Phoenix or the X-Men. I agree with you. I think I think that's exactly what they're doing. And I think it's brilliant. I think that Wanda's slide into total full-on batshit psychosis is amazing. And this show is not going to end well. And that's why it's going to be awesome. And I can't wait for it. Can't wait. Chloe sends in a tip and says, the most surreal scene that I've ever seen in a movie was in Stallone's Daylight. Upon watching it after 9/11, was the last scene in the movie showing all of the emergency vehicles with a camera then showing the Twin Towers with the movie ending. Wow, I never thought about that. I kind of like Daylight. They filmed that in Rome, actually. But I never thought about that, Chloe. But watching it again, I only saw it one time. But yeah, old man Livia's son Patrick is here. How are you, sir? Last night, me and the crew were drinking Brass Monkey when I realized WandaVision had dropped 2 minutes after 3 a.m. Shows like this are why instant gratification can ruin genre storytelling. The build-up made the payoff that much more of a first viewing. I agree, man. I agree. I think what's going on with the old WandaVision is so satisfying. It's so satisfying. And that's because the people over at that Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso, they know what they're doing. They're crafting such beautifully done entertainment the way they want it to be. The way they want it to be. Mr. Tickletrunk sends in a super chat and says, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you, your channel, and the discourse I normally see in the chat. The world needs more people like yourself and those you keep company here on this platform. Well, Mr. Tickletrunk, that's very nice of you to say. I very much appreciate that. I have to tell you, I'm just trying to bring forth what I learned growing up. and what I learned going to conventions. Like I kind of said, in the back of my mind, I wanted this to be like, look, when I was growing up, I never had a bad experience with other fans. You know, when you'd go to conventions, or in Seattle, they used to have a thing about at SeaTac called NorwestCon, the Northwest Science Fiction Convention. And I would go there, and we had little comic book conventions at the Seattle Center. And then I would go to my comic book store in Kirkland and hang out every week, or I'd go downtown to Time Travelers or Golden Age Collectibles or whatever, and spend my time, hours sometimes, talking with other fans or the proprietors of the stores, just like we're doing now. And I loved it. It was great. And, you know, the online experience can be not that. But I'm glad you feel that way, because I think we should yub-nub it up here. We should celebrate the love. Yub-nub. That's what I think. And I'm glad you feel that way, because between the moderators and everyone that's here, I think we have a pretty good bunch of folks. And I appreciate you saying so. And by the way, I appreciate you supporting the channel, which allows me to continue on and do this. Jack sends in a super chat and says, Rob, if you and the PGS haven't watched Resident Alien, you have to catch it. It's smart and hilarious. Alan Tudyk is a national treasure. Everyone's telling me to watch it. I need to watch it. I will watch it. But it's not, it sounds funny. I haven't read the original comic, so. Devin Hilton sends in a super chat and says, will the spec script market ever return to the way it was in the 90s, or has that changed forever? Devin is asking an interesting question. So what Devin is asking is people like Shane Black, who directed, of course, Iron Man 3 and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Shane Black was also in Predator. He really made a name for himself when he wrote movies like Lethal Weapon. But one of the things that he did was he wrote a script for a movie called The Last Boy Scout that some of you might have seen, and it sold at the time in the early 90s for a really exorbitant amount of money. The script sold. He wrote it. A spec script is a script that's written on speculation, which means no one's paid for it to be written. A writer's come up with the idea, and the writer's writing it themselves. So The Last Boy Scout sold for $1.75 million after a big bidding war. He then went on to write The Long Kiss Goodnight, and I think that sold for $4 million. And Joe Esterhaus was writing spec scripts. He wrote Basic Instinct. He wrote a lot of other scripts, and they were these superstar writers that they were getting $1 million or more for their scripts. And it was a big deal. The problem is now that world, it's not just the spec script market, it's the whole entertainment business. Movie making itself aren't so much looking for spec scripts anymore, although they are. I mean, they're always looking for good material, but now, it's probably easier to get if you buy someone's article in Esquire magazine and turn it into a movie, that's easier than writing a great spec script. Although, with independent filmmaking being what it is, I think you're going to start seeing a much more innovative, like the lower budget level. There's probably more going on, but I think the spec script market will never come back to where it was. I hope it does. William Everall sends in a super chat about, hello, Rob. It's been a few days since I sent my letter about being able to send super chats to mods. My letter explains it. William Everall made a good point. He said perhaps we could figure out a way so people could super chat or tip the moderators, which in theory is not a bad idea. Unfortunately, there are tax ramifications to that, and I'd have to figure out, yes, believe it or not, in addition to the fees we pay every time, like when you super chat, YouTube takes 30% of your super chats, and then the remainder we are taxed on. That's considered income for the channel. Same with tips. And because tipping goes through PayPal, you get tax forms generated at the end of the year. So I don't know. Not that I'm not. And then if we had set that up, suddenly we're in a position where it becomes a payroll issue. So there's a lot of business concerns to that proposition, and it's something Mike and I are both looking into. But the idea is sound. Emma Bannon says, hi, Rob. Favorite Christopher Plummer role from Sound of Music, Triple Cross, The Man Who Would Be King, Murder by Decree, and others. He's been so good in so many. By the way, do you know what E.T. is short for? Because he's got little legs. you know what? Do I know what E.T. is short for? Because he's got little legs. One time somebody, Emma Bannon, is going to tell someone one of these jokes, and they're going to bend her over and spank her bare bottom, in which case I bet she'll come back to me and say, that was what I was hoping for all the time. But I have to say, okay, Emma, I love your jokes. I must say, your wit continues to amaze me. And I think you saved some of your bigger groaners for me personally, which I won't take personally, but I think they're funny. But you ask a good question. Favorite Christopher Plummer role? You know, he's been in a lot of great stuff. When I think about Christopher Plummer, I knew he was in Sound of Music, but until I watched it for Whining About Movies, I'd never seen Sound of Music, and he was great in that. Although he was kind of a dick too, but he grew into it. I really like him in Star Trek VI. I mean, as a Klingon, I thought he was so great, obviously, but I think, you know, he's just a terrific actor. And The Man Who Would Be King is one of my favorite movies. Murder by Decree is a good one. But I don't know if I have a favorite performance of his. I mean, I have to go back and watch and look through his whole oeuvre. But I certainly liked him as Krug because he understood his Shakespearean. He was a contemporary of Shatner's. William Shatner, by the way, is going to be 90 years old on March 22nd, meaning next March. I mean, this coming March. So in a little over a month, William Shatner is going to turn 90. And I believe Christopher Plummer was 91. They were in school together, things like that. So, yeah. What? Livia's other son, Pat, sends in a tip and said, the most important thing, know the material. Second, respect the material. Third, don't ever disparage the original creators of the storylines. That happened with Donner, Burton, Raimi, to a lesser extent others. Feige, Esposito, and Alonso have done this since Iron Man. I agree. They know their stuff. Gaming Thunder. Send in a super chat. Thanks, Gaming Thunder. Hi, Rob. I saw a video from Rowan J. Coleman where he compares the Axanar trailer to Star Trek Discovery and concludes it's just like Star Trek Discovery. Did you see it? Maybe you can get him on the show and talk Star Trek Discovery. He seems to like Star Trek Discovery. I don't know. I disagree with that. You know, and having worked on the script for Axanar with Bill Hunt for a long period of time, I can tell you that ultimately, if I was able to direct the Axanar feature as was planned, the whole story of Axanar would have been the story, in my mind, of it's the story of a reluctant warrior, the character of Garth of Izar, who was one of the great explorers of the Federation, discovers through the crucible of war that he's a great warrior, although he doesn't like it. And that's the whole idea, is that, and he brings the reason he becomes a great tactician and strategician is because he uses his knowledge of celestial mechanics and orbital mechanics and physics. He turns those to his advantage. So it's really about how a reluctant warrior rises up and ends up putting an end to a war. So I don't think Axanar and Star Trek Discovery, aside from the fact that they deal with conflict, were exactly the same. William Everall sends in a super chat and says, anyways, if you don't see it, people would just put mods in the super chat function and then it would be divided up at the end of the month and people aren't forced to do it. Listen, like I said, I appreciate the idea, but we have tax considerations to take care of. And there's also then there's employment considerations to take care of as well. And I mean, I have to send all that information to my accountant and everything. And it all goes into my business account. So there are business considerations to take into account, and Mike and I are on that. Justin Jorgensen says, I'm back. I know it's easy to make fun of Michael Bay movies, but man, do I love the first Transformers. Not only was it still stunning to look at, but I genuinely feel it's a great film. Definitely one of my favorites, and no, not as a guilty pleasure. Justin, I like the first Transformers. I thought the story of a boy and his dog was really a boy and his dog, a boy and his car, a boy and his Transformer was a good story. I really enjoyed it. It's a little crass. I mean, it's very Michael Bay, but I enjoyed it. I thought the effects were great, and there's some really amazing stuff in there. For me, the movie breaks down at the end with this sort of incoherent battle in the streets, it gets a little, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? I sort of lose touch. Jake Damon says, is Monica's aerospace engineer friend none other than Reed Richards? He's talking about WandaVision. That would blow my mind. We see some gray sidewalls, and he turns to look at the camera and reveal the face of John Krasinski. I think if that happened, everybody would go bananas, and that to me would be an amazing thing. I have no knowledge of this. I don't know. On one hand, I would say to you, I'd be like, well, how can they... Would they really introduce the Fantastic Four in WandaVision? And then my first inclination would be like, no. But then as I think about it, I'm like, they introduced Black Panther in Civil War. And why not? I mean, we're talking about, especially from the John Byrne era of Fantastic Four, this kind of thing is right up the alley of that. The more I think about it, people have been saying this to me, I'm like, now, I wouldn't be surprised. Sheriff Carl says, I've always loved samurai movies. Kurosawa is obviously the GOAT, but I think one of the best in recent years was the Japanese remake of Unforgiven. I have not seen it. Have you seen it? No. P.S. Shogun rules. I have heard the remake. So for what people who might not know, Sheriff Carl is talking about the Clint Eastwood film, the award-winning Clint Eastwood film that we did whining about movies, this version of Unforgiven that we reviewed on whining about movies recently, they remade that movie, yes, in Japan, the same way that Magnificent Seven was a remake of The Seven Samurai. Here, they took Clint Eastwood's Western Unforgiven and remade it as a samurai movie, and in Japan. And I have not seen it. I've always wanted to. I need to see it. Justin Toner says, Rob, I got my copies of Beastmaster 4K and Martial Laws 1 and 2 from Vinegar Syndrome today. I'm so excited. Also, Dieter says you need to pick up that package he sent you from the post office in the next 2 weeks or it gets sent back to him. Cheers. Yes, I need to do that. Man, I should see if I can do that right now if Elizabeth's not in school. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, what's up, Rob? So now that it's looking more and more certain that the COVID Infinity War saga is coming to its epic conclusion in the coming months with more vaccines, what movie do you think will be the first real movie to lure folks back into the theaters? Well, Nick, it depends when it's supposed to come out. I think if they can get them out, maybe Fast and Furious 9. Maybe. That might be, or Black Widow, whenever that's going to come out. Those might get people back in the theater. A certain group of people anyway. Alex Kurtzman's Paramount sends in a tip and says, great show. Keep up the great work. Next time I run into you, the beers are on Star Trek cash. Bring Elizabeth too. Ta-tas. For now, Kurt's dude forever. All right. I will drink on your tab, Mr. Kurtzman. Anonymous Sony exec says, keep at Kurtzman for all genre fans. I will, anonymous Sony exec, and you keep making those Spider-Man movies. Keep that Spider-Man universe going. Hey, can you hook me up with any, I need a PlayStation 5. Can you help a brother out? I need one with all the memory, though. It'd be helpful. David Street sends in a super chat and says, do you think WandaVision's slow burn is almost too slow? Do you think it would be better if all the episodes came out at once like a Netflix series? No way. It's not too slow at all. It might have started out that way for some people, but no way. As a matter of fact, I mean, the revelations from the very beginning when Agnes is like, oh, I can't, never mind. You know what? I've not said any more spoilers about WandaVision episode 5, but think about it. A Marvel movie is 2 hours long for the most part. There's longer ones, but 2 hours long. We now have we got 2 hours and 45 minutes of WandaVision. And I think the last hour, episodes 4 and 5, my God, breakneck pace, revelations coming every couple of minutes, amazing stuff, and I am totally invested. And people are, even now, I'm talking about the show, everybody's talking about the show. If you binged watch this, people would watch and go, "Oh my God, did you watch WandaVision? It was amazing, right?" But this way, every week, as they're giving us dollops of information and all this stuff, we're getting. I mean, it's come on, the magic of WandaVision. She is out there casting her spell, and you're here for it. I know I am. And weekly, this was the smartest way to do it. Robert Meyer Burnett, CEO, says, "Keep up the good work with your bad self. Sho'nuff!" That would be Sho'nuff, the Shogun from Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, starring Vanity. P.S. R&B for show self. There's a new moon on Monday. Heads up for yourself. I just sang that because you wrote, I can't not sing New Moon on Monday. I light my torch and wave it. Sorry. I know. Louis sends in a super chat and says, "As a fan of The Prisoner, I wonder if you watched the one-season fledgling UPN show Nowhere Man starring Bruce Greenwood, heavily inspired by The Prisoner. It might overall be my favorite show ever." You mean Nowhere Man's your favorite show ever? I did. I'll tell you why. I was working at an ad agency with Craig Mazin, believe it or not, creator of Chernobyl. I was working in an ad agency in 1995 called Jacobs and Gerber, and I was an editor there, and I was making TV commercials. I was a producer-editor, and we were doing the UPN launch campaign, so we were getting all the episodes of shows, and I got to see like a couple episodes of Nowhere Man. I liked it. I liked Nowhere Man. Although I don't think it was as that they really, I don't think they knew exactly where it was going. I think as a pilot, they made the pilot and they're like, we'll figure this out later. But I liked the show a lot. Bruce Greenwood was great. I was a fan of Bruce Pike Greenwood when he was in Adam Egoyan's movies, Canadian films. So yeah, it's good. Stubble McShave is here. Stubble says, "The article about successful franchises and fan interaction rang very true for me when it comes to Amazon and Wheel of Time. I may write a letter about it." Look, from what you're telling me, they know when you have a big fan base. Look at the way Peter Jackson worked and interacted with the OneRing.net. I mean, that's what you want to do. You want to have this kind of fan interaction, and it has to be genuine fan interaction. Like, I have never seen an interview with anybody working on modern Star Trek, whether it's the showrunners, that feels sincere at all. I feel like they're lame talking points, and I feel that the people that are talking about this really don't know. And give me some fan interaction I can believe in. Josh Rosowskis, our own Josh Rosowskis is here. Rob, did you get a chance to read my DM about helping me help my friend? Oh, I need to look into that. And can I apply to be a moderator? Ooh, that's not a bad idea, Josh. You can. I will run that by the folks at home. That's not a bad idea. Stubble McShave says, "Do you think the current shepherds of Star Trek will ignore Shatner's 90th birthday?" Man, I hope not. I hope not. Because next month, William Shatner turns 90. And without DeForest Kelley being here and without Leonard Nimoy being here, I think that Paramount should make March 22nd William Shatner Day, or they should petition the mayor of Los Angeles to make, I'll tell you one thing, March 22nd of next month, we will be celebrating March 22nd on this channel as William Shatner Day. Patty at Large became a member. Thank you, Patty at Large. Scotty37 became a member. Ricky B sent in a super chat and says, "Christopher Plummer was in Star Crash." Yes, he was. He was the Emperor of the Universe, and he stopped the flow of time. By the way, I wonder if anybody's ever made, I would love to get a custom Emperor of the Universe action figure of Christopher Plummer in Star Crash. I would. Justin Jorgensen says, "More horror stories from college. My professor scolded me and told me I was uncultured because I wrote an essay defending Zack Snyder, why he is my favorite director, and pointing out reasons I love Batman v Superman. Man, it is ridiculous." I don't know why a college professor is going around telling their students that their students are uncultured. I would think that he would be kind of intrigued that you even wrote that essay in the first place, and if it was a well written and well argued essay, it should still be something he's interested in. I would say that he's prejudicial and close-minded. And why is he teaching the young minds of America? Stub McShave says, I think one of the most interesting revelations on WandaVision was the surveillance material from S.W.O.R.D. I agree, Stubble. I'm not going to say what they are because I've so far gone spoiler-free, I think, mostly about WandaVision this episode. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Let's see. I'm going to go back to your letters. This first letter comes from Eric Gant. Eric says, "Greetings, Rob. I just finished last week's episode of The Stand, and I wanted to take a moment to drop a quick rant and hopefully find an answer to something that's been bothering me. Trash Can Man. Seriously, I really want to like this series, or at least not hate it. But watching the way this character is depicted makes me think of one thing, MOON, and that spells, what the fuck? As I remember, Trashy was a mentally unbalanced pyromaniac whose obsession was so extreme, it outweighed his sense of self-preservation. He loved two things, fire and Randall Flagg. And when I say love, I'm talking about religious adoration. Fire is his religion and Flagg is his god. There's no prurient element involved. This new version is something else. Am I crazy, or is he being depicted as some kind of sexual deviant with a fetish for fire? Note, I'm not passing judgment on anyone who might be sexually attracted to fire as long as no one gets hurt. Hey, you do you, boo. My issue isn't with the fetish itself, but it has me wondering why. Why change the character like this? I can't see any way that it adds to the story. In fact, it lessens it. Within seconds of the character's appearance on screen, I find myself cringing and disconnecting from the story. Is there something I'm missing? Is there some behind-the-scenes reason that the writers or producers would change the character like this? Anyway, other than this puzzling character depiction, I'm still kind of enjoying the series. It isn't what I hoped for, but it isn't terrible. Now, before you kick me out of the shuttle bay, let me explain why I find it tolerable. Like you, I think I read this letter before, but I like it anyway. Like you, I'm a fan of both the novel and the original miniseries. But as epic as the story is, I've always seen it as but a chapter in an even grander and more epic tale, The Dark Tower. You see, my first exposure to the superflu and the story of The Stand was in King's third Dark Tower novel, The Wastelands. After completing that novel, I picked up The Stand as something to tide me over until the release of the next Dark Tower book. I freaking love The Dark Tower. I've read the series, as well as every King novel even remotely connected to it, more times than I can recall. Because of this, the disappointment I experienced with the Dark Tower movie was an almost visceral thing. The missteps, mistranslation, and overall mishandling of the thing still gets me worked up. Long story short, the movie seriously lowered the bar for me. To be specific, it took the bar out back, shot it, and buried it 10 feet underground. In comparison to that, I'd give the new version of The Stand a solid meh. Other than Trash Can Man, most of the characters are okay, the production value is solid, and the hope that we'll see some Dark Tower Easter eggs will keep me following until the end. Eric Gant. Well, Eric, I got to tell you, we might, because Stephen King actually wrote the last episode, which is supposed to take us into the territory that they covered in the long version in 1990. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get some Dark Tower stuff. I have really not liked The Stand at all, the approach they've taken. I think Ezra Miller came up with this take, and they allowed him to go with it. And I think, in a way, I do think that they should have maybe perhaps pulled back on what they did there, because it's pretty extreme. Pretty extreme. Ian Samuels is back. Rob, and so it is with great sadness that we say goodbye to Mira Furlan, Croatian-born actress who as a child survived the Balkans War. Of course, where many of us know Mira is from Babylon 5, playing Ambassador Delenn of the Minbari. Mira gave the character of Delenn gravitas, strength, and most of all, believability. Often aliens in sci-fi are played very alien, but with Babylon 5, Straczynski's writing and the performance of the likes of Peter Jurasik, Andreas Katsoulis, and of course our beloved Mira made the characters live, made them believable. Mira would of course go on to appear in other successful series, including Lost, but she is a heavy loss to many sci-fi fans. Goodbye to our ambassador of love, wife of the president. Rest well. Ian Samuels. What a nice remembrance, Ian. I appreciate that. I really like that. That's great. Thank you so much. Let's see. I think, that's good. I like that. Okay. Who else is here? Let's see. Greg Smith is here. Hey, Greg Smith. The problem with the idea of moderators getting tips, and he's a tip, is it would remove the appearance and therefore expectation of moderator impartiality. Ooh, I'd never thought of that, Greg. There you go. There's a good answer. I'll have to pay you guys under the table then. Nick sends in a super chat and says, if the MCU does more like episode 5 of WandaVision, will there be fan service fatigue eventually? Is there such a thing as too much fan service? How crazy can things get? Well, Nick, I don't see what's going on in WandaVision as fan service at all. I think there's a difference. I think fan service is pandering. I think when you do something that feels not necessarily intrinsic to the plot, but trying to curry favor with fans, I think that's what most people mean by fan service. But I think WandaVision is a total extrapolation of what the MCU is. After 23 movies, we know where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is at. We know what's happening. And if indeed the events of WandaVision set off an ongoing unraveling of reality, as I would suspect, I think that what happened, I think that J. Jonah Jameson in the end of Spider-Man Far From Home is a manifestation. Remember, WandaVision basically takes place 3 weeks after Endgame. And Spider-Man Far From Home takes place 8 months after Endgame. So WandaVision takes place 7 months and change before Spider-Man Far From Home. And when we find out that, look, we've got Mysterio mentions the multiverse and says he's from a different Earth. And we see a J. Jonah Jameson that is from a different Sony Spider-Man franchise. Clearly something's going on with reality there that's bigger than we even know. And they've been planning for it. So I wouldn't call that fan service. I would call that this is the storytelling, and they're bringing all of these threads together, which is very exciting. So I would I look at it that way. And I think, fan service is, to me, pandering. So, yeah. Elizabeth has asked, she doesn't have any more classes, so she wants to know if we're doing a show tonight. Yes. On Whining About Movies this evening, we are starting the first of our Viewers' Choice Awards that will fill up the month of February. And our first movie is the Coen Brothers gangster epic that I love, love, love so much, Miller's Crossing. And we are doing that tonight at 7:30. What is the rumpus? Well, tune in at 7:30 and find out with the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, and the enchantress of entertainment, and myself. But you don't care about me. You only care about her, and I understand. She's great. So tune in tonight. And let's see, what else can I tell you? I think that's it. I think it is time to end this episode of Robservations, a show about something. This was episode, 613. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank all of my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and the Richard, moving on to Robert Priso, Bunyan Snipe, Joshua Levesque, Justin Toner, Greg Smith, and all my other lovely moderators. I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to thank all of you, all of the viewers of this channel who generously support the channel through not just tips and super chats, but letters. So thank you for that. If you don't subscribe, I don't usually ask for it. Please subscribe. Smash that like button. Hit that bell. And all that, the things you hear many YouTubers talk about. So do those things. It does help the channel. And hitting likes on the videos is always helpful for the analytics, because that's what you want to do. You want to keep those YouTube analytics rolling. I mean, it is kind of like we get ratings. I mean, we do, really. We kind of get ratings. And I want my ratings to go up. I want to be like a Nielsen darling, even though there isn't, Nielsen for YouTube. But I want to be that way. And I hope you'll help me reach those goals. But anyway, I will be back once again, 7:30 tonight, whining about movies. We're covering the Coen brothers' excellent, excellent film, Miller's Crossing, with a script that is literally, the dialogue in Miller's Crossing is like if you repeat the lines of dialogue that they say, they taste good in your mouth. It's actually delicious dialogue. Delicious. Scrumptious. So tune in for that. Be there for that, because I know I will. 7:30 tonight, and then tomorrow I will be back on Robservations. Tomorrow on Saturday. I don't know if I'm going to be here Sunday because the Super Bowl's on. Maybe I will be. I'm not sure yet. And I got to find out about Let's Get Physical Media as well. But I want to thank you for being you. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, well, be seeing you. And have a better day. Oh, wait. I think at the end, no, I'm good. I don't think I missed anything. No. Yes, William Everall sends in a last super chat. He says, to rebut Greg Smith's comment, so if we tip Robert Meyer Burnett, it will make him partial or ruin his impartiality. Well, you know, you can buy my opinion. I'm for sale if you want me. I will be your whore. Just pay me enough money, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. Within reason. I have no problem with that. And on that note, have a better day.